Hello and welcome back to the Specialist Learning Podcast. I'm Katie Nelson, dyslexia and dyscalculia specialist and founder of the Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Academy. Each month I use this space to share reflections from practice, insights from specialist work and things I see every day when supporting learners and families. The aim is always to give you something really practical to think about, something that helps you understand dyslexia and dyscalculia more deeply, and something that you can take straight into your own practice or home life. So, wherever you're listening from today, whether you're driving, having a cup of tea, or just taking that quiet moment, I'm really glad that you're here. Today, I'd like to talk about something that I honestly think almost every tutor experiences at some point. Okay, so you finish the session, you pack your resources away, you get in the car, and you start replaying everything that happened. Perhaps the learner struggled much more than usual. Perhaps they couldn't remember something you've covered several times before. Perhaps they became overwhelmed, shut down, or avoided a task altogether. And then the questions start. Should I mention this to Mum? Is this something I should be worried about? Could this be dyslexia? Could it be dyscalculia? Am I allowed to say that? If you've ever had those thoughts, you're not alone. In fact, I'd probably go as far as saying they're a sign that you're a very reflective tutor. Because good tutors notice things. It's just part of what we do. We notice when confidence changes, we notice patterns, we notice what happens when a learner struggles to access learning, we notice what seems to make things harder. The difficulty actually comes when we move from noticing. So actually trying to explain what it is we've noticed. And that's where today's episode comes in. Because there's a really important difference between observation and interpretation. Okay, let me give you an example here. Imagine you've got a learner who regularly loses their place, for example, whilst reading. They may skip lines, they miss small words. They become tired after only a few minutes. Now, those are observations. The things you've actually seen happen. But imagine saying to the parent, I think they may have visual stress, or I think they may have dyslexia. Can you hear the difference? One is describing what happened. The other is actually explaining why you think it happened. Now, these are two different things, visual stress and dyslexia, and I'm just giving these as an example. And I often say to tutors that the observations themselves are the evidence. Interpretations are opinions. And our role is to become really confident with the first one, because observations are incredibly valuable. So you might say to a parent, I've noticed Jamie often needs instructions repeating before starting, or I've noticed Sophie is much more successful, perhaps when information is broken into smaller chunks. Or another one, perhaps, I've noticed Ben can explain his ideas brilliantly verbally, but he is finding it much harder to record them in writing. Now, those are powerful observations. They're useful, they're objective. They're things that parents and schools can build a picture with over time. But notice none of those statements are trying to explain why. They're simply describing what you've seen. And I think that's actually where tutors add enormous value. Now, here's another situation I hear about quite often. A parent asks, okay, do you think my child's dyslexic? It's a difficult question, isn't it? Because naturally we do want to help. But we don't want to sound evasive. We don't want the parent to think we're avoiding the question. But equally, it's not our role to identify or diagnose based on tutoring sessions alone. So instead of feeling you need to provide an answer, try changing the conversation. So you might say something like, yeah, I've certainly noticed some learning behaviours that are making reading more difficult for them. I can't say why that's happening, but I do think it's worth discussing further with school or considering whether a specialist assessment will be helpful. Can you hear how different that feels? You're not dismissing the parent's concern, you're acknowledging it, but you're also staying firmly within your professional role. And I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts tutors can make. We don't need to have all the answers. Sometimes our greatest value comes from asking good questions. Another example. Perhaps you've got a learner who becomes extremely anxious every time maths appears. They might say things like, I'm stupid, I'm rubbish at maths, I can't do this. Now, we absolutely notice that. We support their confidence, we adapt our teaching, we celebrate success, but we don't jump to conclusions about anxiety disorders or underlying conditions. Instead, we might simply document. The learner appeared highly anxious when beginning calculation tasks and required reassurance before engaging. Again, that's descriptive, it's factual, it's professional. And over time, those kinds of observations become incredibly valuable. One thing I've learned over this year is this: tutors often feel pressure to explain everything, especially when parents are looking to us for reassurance. But actually, it's perfectly okay to say, I've noticed this, or I'll continue monitoring it, or let's see whether that pattern continues. Sometimes slowing ourselves down protects everyone. It protects the learner, it protects the family, and it protects us professionally. It's one of the reasons I've designed the Level 4 dyslexia qualification. The other thing I'd encourage you to remember is that referral isn't failure. Sometimes tutors worry that referring means they've reached the limit of what they can offer. But I see it very differently. Referral is often one of the most professional decisions you can make. It says, I've recognised that this may sit outside my expertise. And there's real confidence in that. Because strong tutors don't try to become educational psychologists, specialist teachers overnight, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, clinical psychologists. Strong tutors know where their role begins and where somebody else's expertise becomes important. Again, that is why I have designed the Level 4 qualification. And it's not a weakness, it's good professional practice. To support you with today's episode, I've created a reflection guide called What Can I Notice versus What Do I Refer? So if you haven't done any further specialist training, such as the dyslexia certificate, you may want to just use this to help you make those decisions. Rather than telling you what to think, it helps you pause after those sessions that stay in your mind. It encourages you to ask yourself, what did I actually observe? What sits within my role? What might sit outside my scope? And what would be the most ethical next step? Because very often, simply working through those questions gives us much more clarity. The guide is designed to strengthen professional judgment through observation, reflection, and decision-making within a clearly defined tutor role. Before we finish today, I'd like to leave you with one final reflection. The next time you walk away from a tutoring session and you're wondering what to say, just ask yourself this. Am I describing what I observed? Or am I trying to explain something I can't yet know? Because that small question, well, it really does create one of the most important professional boundaries we can develop as tutors. And interestingly, it's often that boundary that builds the greatest trust with families over time. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope it's given you something practical to reflect on in your own practice or at home. And if you're listening on Spotify or another podcast platform, make sure you check the session notes where you'll find the supporting resource linked to this episode. And if you're listening inside the Tutor Vault, you'll know that alongside each podcast episode, you can access a growing library of specialist tools designed to support learners with dyslexia and dyscalculia. This month's supporting resource is What Can I Notice versus What Do I Refer? A professional reflection guide to help you distinguish between observations you can ethically make within tutoring sessions and concerns that may need referring through the appropriate channels. If you're not inside the Tutor Vault and you'd like to access those resources, just head on over to www.dyslexia-academy.com. Thank you again for being here. Until next time, take care and keep supporting learning with understanding.